Hi there, and welcome to the start of a new fascinating story about a ghost. The story is set in the late 80s in the city of Glasgow. And the main character in this story is a man called John. John is in his mid-50s and he's a bit worse for wear, and he looks older than his age. He looks world weary and worn, almost worn out, and he lives in a small flat in a high-rise tower block in the centre of Glasgow with a spectacular view over the M8. He's very high up, near to the top of the tower, and it's a kind of high-rise flat tower that was built as a great idea in the early 60s, but turned out to be desperate, for so many reasons, a desperate form of housing. So after a while they started to demolish them. In the 80s they started to pull them all down, and this one's still surviving. It's a place that very few people would want to live, but John, having not much choice or many options, he's in there in his small flat in this clinical, horrible high-rise flat with he lives there in isolation. He gets a good view, no doubt about that, over the city, and where he used to work he can view that, which is the shipyards. He used to be somebody to be reckoned with. He was a sharp steward, a union man through and through, bit of a folk hero type of figure, but now those days are gone. So John now lives a lonely life in this small tower flat in the centre of Glasgow. Out of his window he can see the River Clyde and the remnants of the shipping industry when it was at its peak, perhaps the 60s, 70s. We're now into the late 80s, and there's a huge big cranes still there, but they're all redundant. Nothing's been built there anymore, but all the infrastructure's just standing there rusting away. And it's almost like a reminder to John of his heady days when he was an important man. Now, he's almost an invisible man, and he's as redundant as the industry he used to work in. He's not a happy man. He's probably a bit depressed. John is sitting in his armchair in his flat, dozing away, getting 40 winks, and he's dreaming of the old days when the unions were a powerhouse against the government and global corporates, where these people would fight with conviction for their livelihoods, even though industry was changing, the world was changing. It was no longer required for this heavy industry to be located in Glasgow. It's probably been directed over to the Eastern world, China and this type of thing, and we were becoming more of a technology-based society. This was something that John just simply could not handle. He couldn't handle the transfer to this new way of earning a living. As far as he was concerned, hard graft and hard drinking was how a real West Coast man should behave. Heavy industry, get your hands dirty, and then get bevied up in the evening. So he's thinking about the old days and the union disputes and the camaraderie, and he's dreaming as he's sleeping there, snoozing in his armchair, and he's compiling a scrapbook. So he's got all sorts of newspaper clippings from the old days, and he writes his memoirs in a jotter, keeps him going. Very serious man, John. So serious, I think his face is just stuck in a permanent dour or dour scowl. He's someone who is out of place in the late 80s, where Glasgow is no longer a shipbuilding city. It has cafe bars, sushi bars, and all these types of things that John simply can't relate to, and he hasn't moved with the times, and stubbornly won't move with the times. He feels that the old days are the right ways, and he's been robbed of his sense of purpose and dignity. He hankers back for those old days when he was a proper man and not just a nobody living in his tiny wee box flat on the 20th floor of the tower block. John is as working class as it gets. That's what defines him. But people in Glasgow in the newer high-tech jobs moving into the late 80s see himself more sophisticated and heading towards middle class, where people were starting to buy their own house and be upwardly mobile, thinking they might be a yuppie, that type of thing. This is all lost on John. John remembers the passion of the fight, the union fights against the government for their rights to earn an honest wage and not be for people to tread roughshod over these men. He hankers for those days. It's about 20 past 12, just slightly into the afternoon, and John suddenly wakes up from his dwam, his snooze, and sees that it's very bright daylight outside. And he's a bit shocked. He goes, "My God!" He hadn't realised what time it was, and he leaps up from his armchair, heads over to his small desk near the window, and starts shuffling through and rifling through bits and bobs of papers on the desk, looking for something, desperately looking for something, and he's doing this at speed. Some time limit has just appeared on his horizon in his experience. He's looking around for something, a ticket or a piece of paper or a coupon, and he's grabbing, opening everything, even bins, and he managed to find what he's after, but he's running out of time. Puts it in his jacket pocket. He's got an old-fashioned suit type of jacket, a worn suit. John's not a kind of casual sportswear or shell suit type of person. He's still dressing as if it's 1962, and probably his jacket and trousers, flannel trousers, come from that time. Just dark, plain linen material. Old-fashioned looking now in the late 80s, where people are a lot more trendy. And he grabs his small Yale key, flimsy little key, and walks out of his flat into the landing and shuts the door, which is so flimsy you could just lean on the door and it would just open. It's almost just like a cardboard partition with a tiny little flimsy Yale lock. He shuts the door over and steps into a bare, stony grey landing, and along a bit there is a lift shaft door. This is not a nice environment. It's stony, it's cold, it's grey, it's dark, but it's where he lives, and he's in a hurry.